Vanakkam. I'm actually nervous on two counts. One, the title is about Periyar, and I'm sure you would know how daunting that is. And second, to converse with Chalapathy, who's also your friend, but it's very nervous. Okay. When we were discussing this topic, how to kind of take this conversation forward, Chalapathy casually mentioned something. Do an introduction of Periyar for a couple of minutes. And I'm sure nobody else in this room will know how difficult it is as much as Chalapathy does to introduce Periyar. I think it's a Periyar, of course, he had introduced Tamil Nadu on global intellectual map, and today is Periyar, I think Chalapathy, through this Cambridge companion to Periyar, has got some global, I'm not sure if I should say recognition, but kind of appeal. But I wanted to, and of course, Venkatachalapathy is as the moderator mentioned, is a well-known intellectual historian, and he recently won Sahitya Academy. So I wanted to start asking Chalapathy by how would Periyar would have reacted to because he completely rejected this idea of being put into any kind of frame or label. So how would have Periyar reacted to a Cambridge companion on Periyar?
Vanakkam. I'm delighted to be here, doing a panel on Periyar in the Hindu Lit Fest. I think it's a very important moment because Periyar's work was continuously reported by Hindu, not necessarily in very positive terms. How much things have changed in the last 50 years is, I think, this huge crowd that has turned up demonstrates it. I am under no delusion that this crowd gathered for me. It is for Periyar. So it's a very speculative question. I would think I will respond in two ways. First thing is, first he would have been very happy. Not that a book has been published about him in the Cambridge series, but somebody of my social class has published a book with the Cambridge University Press and found some sort of standing in the academic world. He would have said, this is one of the reasons why I led this long struggle right from the 1920s. But I'm not exactly sure if he would have been happy that he is the subject of a book 50 years after his death. Because constantly in his life, he repeatedly said that, he hoped there would be a day when people would say, in those days, there was a very backward-looking, regressive thinker called Periyar, but he was celebrated in his time as a revolutionary thinker. But how things have changed, now, Periyar is seen as a backward-looking, regressive person. So that kind of change is what Periyar hoped for, and that is a day that hasn't yet come. So he would not exactly be happy that he is being, in a sense, this is a work of, this is an academic work which conforms to the cardinal principles of academic and disciplinary and protocols. But despite that, you can see that there is a lurking admiration for Periyar out through this disciplinarian framework and the academic protocols. So Periyar would, I would believe that, Periyar would rather be happy with being outdated rather than being celebrated. He would want to be an iconoclast rather than an icon. Yeah. And if the icon continued to proliferate, he would have taken up a sledgehammer and shattered the icons that have come up in his own place. So that is the kind of thinker he was. So this would be my speculative answer.
I mean, you call him a non-canonical thinker. So what do we actually gain, or what do we lose from, kind of moving Periyar from a street corner to a university library?
So let us be very clear. We are not doing Periyar any favor by writing academic essays, academic monographs, and putting him, putting his portrait in Oxford University or having books published on him by university presses. We are not doing him any favor. We are doing ourselves a favor. By non-canonical thinker, what we mean to suggest, myself and my collaborator Ram Manohar and Karthik, what we are trying to do is enrich the political vocabulary, the analytic vocabulary that is essential to understand the times in which we live. The continuing persistence of pernicious practices associated with caste, religion, patriarchy, etc. So that is what we are trying to do. It is only a first step, I think, but it is definitely a very important step. When the first invitation came from the Cambridge University Press, asking us to do a companion, asking me to do a companion, and I was with great trepidation, I looked at it because uh, Periyar is very close to our heart. But the moment you try to theorize his long life and his multifaceted activities, there was not a day when he did not address two meetings. That is, he addressed two meetings on days when he did not address three meetings. Uh, and interestingly, he was an old man all his life. Right from the age of 50 until 94, 95, he was always seen as this, old man who was greatly experienced. And the challenge for us was to, capture his thought into some kind of a system. We know that, Periyar, probably I'm anticipating some of your questions. Periyar, most of the time, thought on his feet, or I should say, the thought when he was squatting on the podium. He used to speak for 3 hours and 4 hours, and he responded to the burning questions of the day in a very chatty, perhaps we can even say coarse language, but his mind was alive all the time. So he was commenting on various things all the time. Every day, when you read the newspapers, you see how prescient Periyar was. Just to give one instance, this was in the papers 3-4 days ago. An educational institution has encroached upon public land. All the courts have held that, it is illegal. But finally, it goes to the highest court and they say, this is for a good charitable purpose. So the government should rethink. Periyar would have said, we know this. This is how it was bound to happen. So at every instance, we see that, Periyar makes this prescient observations. The challenge before us, the 13 chapters, there are 13 chapters in the book. That also reminds me of an interesting anecdote. This was not by design. Though Periyar would have thought, we had an unlucky number of 13 to do this. So when somebody went up to him and said, this was in the 1960s, they went up to Periyar, a white man went up to Periyar and said, you are criticizing Indians and Tamils for being superstitious. But come to America, we have so many other superstitions. We don't have 13th floor number. People don't walk under ladders. Periyar laughed and he asked him, why you are laughing? He said, I never said there are no fools in the other parts of the world. I am concerned about our own fools. And I want to change them. So these 13 chapters here, what we try to do is from our own disciplinarian backgrounds. There is a historian, there is a political scientist, there is a film studies expert, there is a Tamil scholar, there is even a radical psychologist in this volume. All of us have taken the inadequate apparatus given by our disciplines or the inadequate training we have in this disciplinarian apparatus to try to capture what Periyar tried to articulate in his own times. How did he explain the world and the injustices in that world that he saw? How did he try to explain it? This is the challenge that we faced. If we have succeeded in even some small measure, that would be recompense enough for putting together this volume.
Thank you. Okay, Periyar was like he deliberately kind of cultivated an anti-reputation, which made him say things that nobody would like dare to say even today. No politician would dare to say. And he once remarked that there is more profit in calling him a thief or a scoundrel than being called a Periyar. So I just wanted to understand what kind of enabled him to be so radical for us.
Uh, any kind of question that tries to grapple with the personality of Periyar is going to be very difficult. As I said, right from the beginning, the beginning of his public life. His public life starts somewhere from around the First World War, towards the end of the First World War. So his early times are spent in the Indian National Congress. But even when he is in the Congress, you should see some of the statements he's making. 1923-24, he is talking about the impending Hindu Religious Endowments Act. While the position of the Indian National Congress was against that, he, despite being the secretary and later the president of the Tamil Nadu Congress Committee, takes a very strong position and he articulates almost all the ideas that it expounds after he leaves the Congress. He said, what is the structure of the state? Who are the ruling castes? Who are the ruling classes? What is the state of the temples? How they will try to scuttle any attempt to reform the Hindu religious institutions. He states all that, and he also says by 1923 itself that I will not hesitate to walk out of this organization if I am unable to reform it. So at every stage, he takes often very antagonistic positions, and I would, some people might, flinch when I draw this comparison. Is actually in many senses, despite the apparent opposition between Periyar and Bharadiyar, there are big commonalities. Bharadiyar says in many places, our people are like the pitan. Even if you light a fire in the tail of the pitan, the malapambu எழுந்துகாது. So our people are like that. So what Periyar shared the same understanding. So he deliberately provoked people. Hidebound practices, hidebound ideas. He attacked directly and he said, this gentle prodding that, Vallalar or Paramahamsa or Tayumanavar or whoever, tried to attempt, it's not going to work. So he believed in shock therapy. He repeatedly, from the 1920s, when he said, the idols have to be turned over and have to be used as washing stones, to 1971-72, when he said that adultery should be taken out of the Indian Penal Code. When did any lawyer take up this case? Suhrit might be here to tell us, when was the first time, somebody took up the, the iniquitous nature of the provision for adultery. So 1971, he says, we have to do away with this. So at every stage, he tried to shock people. And we have to remember, I have a theory, you use the term Periyar. Very interestingly, even though he was formerly, quote unquote, crowned with the moniker or, venerable term Periyar only in 1938. Even by 1927, people used to refer to him as Periyar. In the 1933 short story that Pudhumaipithan writes, Pudhiya Nandan, he calls Ramasamy Periyar. So it was very common. But I have an argument, which I hope to explicate in my book. I don't know when it is going to come, but even by 1949 or 50, Only after the entire party, there is a huge exodus in his party. 1949, following his marriage to Maniyammai, the party splits, DMK is formed. All the leaders leave him. He is left practically alone. There is only one person with him, with his Kutusi Gurusamy, and even he was a kind of fence sitter. Anybody else would have been shattered. But Periyar takes up the challenge. He moves his headquarters from Chennai to Tiruchi, gives up the paper to Gurusamy to run, and he travels all over Tamil Nadu. Every nook and corner, every dirt track, he goes, he speaks to the people. And whom is he addressing? He is addressing the common people. He is talking to them late into the night. So he uses a language which is completely diametrically opposite to the kind of platform Tamil that we are familiar with. He talks to the people. It is a conversational style. It is a chatty style. And by this time, his health was also failing. He had a very bad hernia. So he would sit on the platform, very informally dressed in a lungi, ஒரு கை வச்ச பனியன், அதுக்கு மேலே an unbuttoned black shirt. He would speak for 3 hours. And he would express the most provocative ideas, but also he would share his wisdom. Every paragraph of his speech was bristled with idioms and proverbs which no folklorist has been able to collect in the last 100 years. So he could connect with the people. So he was a different man. He didn't seek the status of a tyagi. He said, I don't want to be a tyagi. Going to prison is actually rest for me. So I would prefer to, whenever I'm very tired, I would prefer to go and rest in the prison. So when people accused him of, backtracking, of developing cold feet, he said, yes, please be a brave man if you want. Yes, I am a coward, but I am a coward for my own ideals. I want to achieve the ideals that I have set out to achieve. I don't care about words of abuse.
Thank you. So you mentioned about Maniyammai. So I wanted to ask a question. His marriage to Maniyammai is a point of debate till today. It's either seen as a scandal or strategy. The book seeks to reposition Maniyammai as an intellectual leader in her own right. Can you explain about it?
So anybody who is familiar with WhatsApp would know the calumny that is heaped on Maniyammai. So, but I must say that the calumny heaped on Maniyammai in 1949 and 50, the present day WhatsApp University calumny will not hold a candle to that. That was how abusive the political leaders and the critics of Periyar were at that time. So one of the big achievements of this book, I am proud of it, is that in the standard biographies or the received wisdom of Periyar, Nagammal plays a very important role. Nagammal, his wife, is an amazing woman. She is somebody who can match Periyar word for word. She could have her way with Periyar. She was the only person who could force Periyar to have a bath. That kind of a strong-willed woman she was. She took part in the Vaikam Satyagraha. She broke the barricades, went in, courted arrest. She was that kind of a man. And I think, she kept Periyar grounded. And rightly, she is celebrated in the biographies and the writings about the Dravidian movement. But in the case of Maniyammai, I must also say that, we are all part of the same tradition. The received wisdom about Maniyammai was not, very great. But now when you look at it closely, first, Maniyammai was not a 15-year-old girl, 16-year-old girl, and Periyar was not a 50-year-old man. The parallel might be obvious. George Arundel was 50. Rukmini Devi was 16 when they got married. Nobody said that, an old man has, deceived a young woman and run away with that woman. We give Rukmani Devi credit. We don't cast aspersions on George Arundel. In this case of Maniyammai, first and foremost, she came from a family, self-respect movement family. Her father was a second level leader in Vellore, so she was familiar with all the second line leaders. By 1944, she was publishing in Vidudalai and Kudiyarasu articles in her own name. She was talking about, for instance, her articles about Kanda Puranam are very sharp. From 1955, she becomes close to Periyar. And you know what gift Periyar gave to Maniyammai? Anybody want to guess? The gift that Periyar gave to Maniyammai in 1945 was this great encyclopedia of Tamil literature called Abhidhana Sindhamani. So Periyar's pickup line was, here is your Tamil encyclopedia of 1,200 pages. If that was the pickup line, you can make an assessment of what kind of woman Maniyammai was. And then when they decided to get married for whatever reason, despite the best advice of Rajagopalachari, he had a reason. They got married. It was a marriage between two consenting adults. Maniyammai was 29 years old, educated, well-read, ideologically oriented. So what is the problem? Bertrand Russell gets married 6 times, one of them in his 80s. Nobody casts aspersions on him. Okay, so this woman, Maniyammai, she makes 2 very big major impact on Periyar's life. Periyar, after the death of Nagammai, practically for the next 15 years, there is practically nobody to support him. He is traveling all over. He is almost like Yasser Arafat. He doesn't sleep in the same bed twice. That is how widely he travels. There's nobody to give him a cup of coffee. This is not my words. This is the words of Manavere Thirumalai Chami, who knew him from the 1920s. After Maniyammai comes into his life, there is some kind of an order. She travels with him all the time, ensures that his acolytes and admirers do not monopolize him, do not, feed him stuff which he should not be eating. And she is also intellectual companion. After Periyar took the podium, Maniyammai would sit outside, spread out a newspaper and hawk the books that Periyar and others wrote. So here I want to give you one example of the kind of role that she played. When she got married to Periyar, Bharatidasan, the great poet, wrote a very strong, almost abusive poem about Maniyammai. He said, மலம் மூடத்தான் மலர் பறித்தேன் என்றால் குளிர் மலர் சோலைதான் கோவென்றடாதோ அப்படின்னு எழுதின அதே பாரதிதாசன் 1958 he says, if our leader, our தலைவர் is moving around despite having a catheterized tube and a urine bucket, we all owe it to this young woman. And later in her life, 1973, after Periyar dies, that is the 70s is a time of crisis for the Dravidar Kadagam. Already number of cases had been, prepared. Income tax files had been compiled in the 1960s so that the organization could be crippled in the 1970s. Within 2 years of Periyar's death, 1.5 years of Periyar's death, the emergency is declared. Who fights the state? Both Asriyar Veeramani and Maniyammai, both of them are arrested. She sees through the organization and she dies in 1978. So I think Maniyammai needs to get her due. If there is a book on Manalur Maniyammai, there should also be a book on Vellore Maniyammai.
Thank you, Chalapathy. That was really very interesting. But that also brings me to the women's question. So this volume points to a tension between Periyar's radicalism and later the movement's idea of, especially in popular culture and cinema, representation of women. Do you think, the movement coming into the political mainstream, has it kind of reshaped its idea of representation of women?
No, this is absolutely true. But I would rather focus on Periyar rather than what happened afterwards. This is for all of us to see. So Periyar writes a series of articles starting from 1928 and 29 for about 3-4 years on various occasions. He writes a number of pieces, and in 1933 he publishes this as a book, Penniyen Adimayanal. And I would, there are scholars here, I would strongly recommend them to take a look at Pasu Gaudaman's critical edition of that book. It's a very small book. If you look at it, the ideas that he expresses there, in 1944, Bertrand Russell publishes Marriage and Morals. Uh, for writing that book, City University of New York, uh, you know, retracts the invitation that it had given to Bertrand Russell for a professorship. But I assure you, please read both the books, Penniyen Adimayanal and Marriage and Morals. Marriage and Morals is a tame, very tame book compared to Penniyen Adimayanal. And to this day, one of the challenges of writing about Periyar is we are not able to really understand what are the ideological roots of his radicalism. Where does he get these ideas? How does his mind work? He's eclectic, it's like Kamarajar, people say Kamarajar படிக்காத மேதைன்னு. அவர் மேதை படிக்காதவர்னு தயவு செய்து சொல்லாதீங்க. அவர் பள்ளிக்கூடத்துக்கு போகாமல் இருந்துக்கலாம், கல்லூரிக்கு போகாமல் இருந்துக்கலாம். They read eclectically. Periyar too, he would always, flip through a dictionary, or he would flip through Abhidhana Sindhamani. Obviously, he had another copy apart from gifting it to Maniyammai. So if you look at his, so he had, the only time I have seen the Valmiki Ramayanam edition of S.M. Nadesa Sastri. Nadesa Sastri translated Valmiki Ramayana into Tamil, which was overseen by U.V. Swaminathan. So whenever he read texts, he went to the original text. And sometimes, he also, there was a couple of advertisements in the Vidudalai. It says, படித்த உலகம் தெரிந்த தமிழ் புலவர்கள் தேவை. He said, I need Tamil Pandits who are both scholars but also this worldly. We don't want antediluvian Tamil scholars who will go into, grammatical niceties. So the idea is that I want a pulavar, I will pay that pulavar. The job of the pulavar is to give me source texts, quotations, passages for the arguments that I put forward. That is how he worked. So this is one way. Erode was a place where the American missionaries were very active. So he was familiar with a whole range of writings. If you read his Ramayana Kadapatrangal or other books, to look at the kind of authorities that he had cited is very interesting. But his ideas were original. He never quoted anybody. So one of the reasons that communists greatly hated him was that, communists have a set of self-validating texts. Okay? Anything they say, oh, Lenin said this, Lunacharsky said this, or Trotsky said this, Periyar said, no, I don't care. So wherever he could, he picked up these ideas, eclectic ideas, but when he forged it and expressed it, it came out in a very, very original way. And that is seen in his feminist ideas as well. Many of the arguments that he puts forth in Penniyen Adimayanal, as you know, you are a feminist, you know it better than anybody else. They are very close to the radical feminists of the 80s.
Because you spoke about the communists, I wanted to ask if, Periyar insisted that caste precedes economics. So how does this challenge the Indian left's tendency to treat caste? I mean, I think it's kind of changing now, but to treat caste as a problem that economic growth will solve it.
Communists, I don't think have really changed. I think CPM still supports EWS. right? Economically weaker section reservation. It still supports it. So their position's more, I think, tactical rather than a clear rethink of their ideological position. So Periyar had he interacted with all the major communist leaders of his times. When I say that, I'm not just referring to, Jiva was his protege, okay? But Jiva turned around and, abused Periyar, but Periyar just, dusted it off. He said, basically, he laughed at him. He said, you left me claiming that I am not a Democrat. We all know what kind of democracy operates in the communist parties. It goes by the euphemism of democratic centralism, where centralism is important, not democracy. Okay, whether it is Jiva or Satankulam Raghavan or even Singara Velar or later Baladandayudham. Baladandayudham had a very interesting relationship with Periyar. It was both admiration, but also, the hidebound nature by which he is bound by the resolutions of the Communist Party. Not only that, he, we all know famously, he visited Dehradun and met M.N. Roy, and no less than Anna was his translator. So they had a wonderful conversation. But M.N. Roy sent some of his lesser leaders to Chennai, and they made a mess of it because they couldn't understand what was the nature of the radical nature of the Dravidian. So S.A. Dange had visited him, met him, Mohit Sen had visited him. 1952 elections, Periyar campaigned for the communists. Of course, we know in 1931-32, Periyar met Rajinikanth Dutt, Clements Dutt. He went to working class districts of Wales. He spoke to, he gave public speeches to the coal workers of Wales. He was close to, he knew Shapurji Saklatwala. So he was in conversation with everybody. But unfortunately, the other side always thought that, their idea was, here is an old man with great amount of influence. How do we win him over to our side without actually rethinking their own positions? So that is why he blew hot, blew cold. 52, he was with them. Again, by 1955, 56, he has distanced himself. So this kind of pendulum-like swaying was there. But of course, this pendulum-like swaying was not endorsed by, 3 yearly conferences where they would have long ideological debates and pass resolutions. That is not how Periyar worked. Periyar responded to his times. Yeah, this is an inside joke between us.
Okay. The book also suggests that Periyar closely watched global movements in 1930s, anti-fascist, anti-colonial movements. Would you say that he envisioned Dravidian movement as a kind of global solidarity movement?
No, I would not say that. I don't want to claim everything for Periyar. There were moments when he was keenly aware of what was going on outside. As I said, when he went to Berlin in 1932, he had long discussions with the League Against Imperialism. That very important anti-fascist forum, which mobilized people against Nazism and fascism. He was in conversation with them. He was in conversation with the free thinkers movement. And very, very importantly, when the famous Scottsboro case, where 10 to 12 black young men were summarily supposed to be executed because without any evidence. Basically, it is the To Kill a Mockingbird story is basically based on that. So the mother of one of the boys went on a world campaign in defense of the young man who there was no evidence to, even prima facie evidence to show that, he had committed anything wrong. So when his mother went on this world tour, Periyar was there in Clerkenwell in the meeting, attending the meeting, and there was an auction of some material to raise funds. Periyar, we know, famously was a penny pincher. He would not waste a single rupee. But there, to contribute to that fund, he bought something in the auction. So generally, while he was kind of aware of what was happening, if you look at Vidudalai of the 1950s and 60s, why I am mentioning 50s and 60s is that before 1949, Dravidian movement was a galaxy. Anna, Sampath, Nedunjediyan, Anbalagan, EVK Sampath, they would all, they could comment about anything in the world. They were following things closely. But even after they all left, Vidudalai newspaper, the 4 pages of the newspaper, 2 pages were devoted to world news and Indian news. And this might warm the hearts of Dr. Nirmala Lakshman. They relied on Hindu for their news about the world. So the most reliable newspaper, even though they didn't accept, their news or views about Tamil Nadu, the Vidudalai newspaper itself relied on the Hindu for world news and Indian news. And this was basically a roundup of what happened. But Periyar himself was concerned with the here and now. He said, there are enough superstitious people, and in his perspective, stupid people in Tamil Nadu, that his hands were full. He didn't have to go around the world and try to convert others. So he desisted from commenting on any of these things. And I would say, even in the case of Soviet Union, people ask, he went to Soviet Union, he was very impressed by the Soviet Union in 1932-33. But what did he say about the show trials? What about the purges? What were the horrors of the gulags and the famine of Ukraine? For him, he was not involved in any of these things. He said, this is a model which we have to follow. And he had a very idealized vision of that. And he also had a very idealized vision of the West. If he saw what Trump is doing now, I don't know how he'd react. But this, he had an idealized vision of the West as the harbinger of modernity, of a secular society, of science ruling and defining the society. So the fact that that did not obtain outside did not actually matter to him. His idea was to change Tamil society, and by extension Indian society, into a modern, forward-looking, progressive society. That was his aim. The details of specifics of what happens in Spain, Spain is a dictatorial state, or Portugal is run by a complete dictator. All these things, he was not particularly concerned. So,
Running out of time, so we'll stop here and we'll open the floor for questions.
So before somebody comes up with a question, I really, really want to say a very big thank you to my collaborator, Ram Manohar and Karthik, who was more than a collaborator, and the contributors to this volume. At least 2 of the contributors are here. Adiyaman, can you please stand up? Adiyaman, who wrote the chapter on Vaikam, and my dear friend and colleague from MIDS, Vijay Bhaskar. That's a very important paper. So this was a conscious effort on our part to also have Tamil voices in this volume. So we have Adiyaman's essay and Trinilagandhan's essay on the Pune Pact, which were originally written in Tamil and rewritten for this volume.
Would you consider his legacy a success? Because earlier today, we heard Shashi Tharoor talking about Narayana Guru, whom Periyar knew very well. And he felt that Narayana Guru was a success. Would you place Periyar's legacy on a similar?
So I have a greatest respect for Narayana Guru. But this opposition between figures, I'm very uncomfortable. Bharatiyar and Periyar and Narayana Guru. See, this is not about Shashi Tharoor, but generally there is this tendency to counterpose Narayana Guru to Periyar to deride and run down Periyar. Same thing, this morning we talked about Nehru and Patel. If you want to celebrate Patel, we are all for it. But if the idea is to run down Nehru, so similarly, yes, Narayana Guru's contribution is amazing. But I have posed this question to many of my Kerala friends. I said, you talk about the decline of Nayar dominance, the famous book by Jeffrey. I tried to count the number of Edava intellectuals in Kerala. Please, if you can come up with 10 names offhand, I would agree. Tamil Nadu, perhaps it has taken 50 years after Periyar's death to bring up these things. What we need to think is, let us not try to counterpose two very important figures. I have a feeling that both of them met once. Adiyaman will vouch for it. Periyar and Narayana Guru, I think they met once. And for people who want to counterpose him, I want to say that some of the greatest Edava leaders held Periyar in the highest esteem. For want of time, I'll give you only one instance. Sahodaran Ayyappan came to Erode in 1933 when Periyar's wife died to condole him and also take part in the portrait wheeling ceremony of Nagammal. So this is the regard that somebody like Sahodaran Ayyappan had for Periyar. So let us not, different societies throw up different leaders. They try their own ways. Whoever succeeds, whatever succeeds, we are happy.
Am I audible, sir? Over here, on your left hand, on your left side. Oh, yeah. So before I start, I'm from Andhra Pradesh. So, of course, Periyar, Iviramas Vamanaigar, or Tamil Singam. So we did heard a lot about him, and we did talked a lot on the both sides of a coin, of course. But me, coming to Tamil Nadu, and it's been like 3 years already. So looking at him, looking at his historical aspects, looking at his stance, looking at his both rational and radical thoughts, I don't think there's some ways or there's some stances which I made to think that he's an figure in such a way which made me to be motivated on some aspect. On first example, which I'd like to talk is in his marriage. For example, being coming from Andhra Pradesh, we do have the then late Chief Minister, Mr. N.T. Ramarao, who had a second marriage and who had a devastating repercussions on later, which had a devastating effect on his life. And so did the same which has happened with the E.V. Ramas Vamanaigar too. And of course, I do think...
so I think you missed my long rumination about...
and I just want to finish this so we can later. But on somehow, I didn't feel or felt so connected with this persona. On the other side, with this...
So you are free to not be inspired by Periyar. Periyar would have said the same thing.
True.
At the end of every speech, he said that, listen to what I say, consider it. If it is worthless, throw it away. That is what exactly he said. You have taken a right decision.
I think that's what I fall in that category. But anyway, I just want to know specifically on this one aspect with his marriage. I just want to understand regarding on his psychological, behavior, on which at that time he could have felt when he has decided to take this decision. This is the one aspect which I wanted to know about. And on the second question which I want to ask is, with this Dravidian movement which was started, I just wanted to know why the people have took the ideas of Periyar, but not the same ideas which has been envisioned by Vaidyanathan Iyer. I just wanted to know a reason behind it. Is it just because he's a Brahmin or someone who has gone against the Dravidian movement? So this is one question which I wanted to know.
Okay, you want to know about A. Vaidyanathan and the temple entry. See, the temple entry movement of the 1930s, spearheaded by the Congress, was a reaction to the kind of movement that started by the 1920s. Second, if Vaidyanathan Iyer did not inspire anybody, he was not a great thinker, he was not a great speaker, he didn't articulate any ideas. So we are talking about, when we are talking about giants, let us stick to giants. He made a reference to another giant, Sri Narayana Guru. Let us talk about giants. You want to talk about Dr. Ambedkar? Periyar would say, he is a giant, I will listen to Dr. Ambedkar. And actually he said, unconditionally, I support Dr. Ambedkar. So this is the lesson that we have to take.
ஒரே ஒரு கேள்விங்க. அவர் அந்த இயக்கத்தை பகுத்தறிவு இயக்கம்னு நம்ம சொல்றது பொருந்துமா, இல்லை திராவிட இயக்கம்னு சொல்றது பொருந்துமா? அடிப்படையான கேள்வி. அவருடைய நோக்கத்துக்கு தகுந்த மாதிரி நம்ம அழைக்கணும்னா அந்த இயக்கத்தை எப்படி அழைக்கிறது? திராவிட இயக்கம் அழைக்கலாமா, இல்லை பகுத்தறிவு இயக்கம் அமைக்கலாமா? இப்ப உலக அளவு எடுத்துட்டு போறாங்க அந்த இயக்கத்தை. அப்போ எடுக்கும்போது எப்படி அது பொருத்தமா இருக்கும்? இந்த காலத்துக்கு தகுந்த மாதிரி எப்படி அந்த இயக்கத்தை நம்ம அழைப்பது?
பாருங்க, ஒவ்வொருவரும் ஒரு இயக்கத்தை எவ்வாறு அழைப்பது என்பது அவங்களுடைய முடிவு. திராவிட இயக்கம்னு சொல்லலாம், ஜாதி மறுப்பு இயக்கம்னு சொல்லலாம், பகுத்தறிவு இயக்கம்னு சொல்லலாம், பகுத்தறிவை கைவிட்ட இயக்கம்னு சொல்லலாம். இது எல்லாமே இந்த விளக்கங்கள், பெயர்கள் எல்லாமே இட் ரிஃப்ளெக்ட்ஸ் தி ஐடியாலஜிக்கல் பொசிஷன் of the person who is giving these names. So you are free to do whatever you want, but what we are trying to do in this volume is trying to take ideas, his movements and activities, historicize them. We are not in the business of naming and branding. That doesn't really help.
Hello, sir.
One final question, please.
Yeah. Shall I?
There is only one.
Sir.
I'm waiting for quite some time.
Okay. Others can actually talk to Chalapathy after the session.
Amazing. I'm a meteorological atmospheric scientist. Already we are connected. My name is Nalaswamy. My question, wonderful session I ever had in my 76 years of my life.
Thank you.
I don't know how to define myself. I'm a Periyarist come Ambedkarist, right? My question is, the social justice, how these two joined together and took up the country. Elsewhere, outside the country, both are very popular. So can you have a small comparison how both succeeded in theirs? Thank you.
I think I would request the curator of this festival to give me one more session next year. We can discuss this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was